Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome back to the GBC SPT page. My name is Deva Madhavadas, and I'm very happy today to be able to conduct a panel interview with a few of the devotees who were involved in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta printing marathon. So I'll bring them in now. We have His Grace Pushkar Prabhu, Haribol Prabhu, Mother Ragatmika, and His Grace Madhusudan Prabhu. Thank you, devotees, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you. Hare Krishna. So again, what the focus of our discussion today is going to be the actual nuts and bolts of this kind of miracle that many of us have heard the short version of, that Srila Prabhupada gave Rameshwar Prabhu Maharaj at the time the instruction to print the rest of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, the books remaining. I believe it was 17 books total in 2 months' time. And Rameshwar Prabhu and the other devotees who were in charge of the BBT at the time, they were astounded. And Prabhupada gave this famous quote that they said this was impossible, in fact, and Prabhupada said that that's a word in a fool's dictionary. And so from there, they strategized, how could we somehow or other do this? And somehow or other, it was done. But we have the somehow or others in front of us today, some of the devotees who practically gave themselves to be able to put this marathon through and make it a success that Srila Prabhupada himself was personally very pleased to see happen. So I'd like to just go around and hear from each of you devotees to start off with how it was you came into Krishna consciousness and how it was that you ended up out in Los Angeles to be involved in this marathon push. Madhusudan Prabhu, maybe we can begin with yourself.
Okay. I joined in New York City, 26 2nd Avenue, 1967, early. I had been wandering around in the drug culture and happened upon the temple. And was attracted right away because of the miraculously, I was right away engaged in typing the manuscript for Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So that engaged my mind, which was pretty crazy at the time, engaged my mind and my senses in constantly hearing the words on the page, Prabhupada's recording, which was edited at the time, and I was retyping it for the manuscript. So that's how I started, and eventually got into a paste up and layout as the printing publication started expanding. And then around 1969, I wanted to get married, and the teachings were that if you're going to get married, you leave the ashram of the guru, earn your way in the world. And so that's what I did. That's when I left the press to get a job and just earn some money. At some point, Prabhupada indicated that it would be possible to live in the temple and still be married. So he gave, different allowances at different times, depending on what was needed. So I had earned this money and I had saved this money, and I wanted to use it to open a temple. That was one of my spiritually lusty desires, to become a temple president and open a temple, because that was the mood at the time, opening temples, expanding them open. So I went with Damodar to open a temple in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, after about a year, I got called back to work on the press, because the press, while I was not with it, was growing. And they actually had a printing press in Boston. So I was called there to do more typing, which was composing for Krishna Book and Nectar of Devotion.
Wow.
So I went there, and then I was with the press from then on. The press moved from Boston after about a year or so to New York and expanded. We got larger presses, more printing was being done. Everything was expanding. Movement was expanding. The printing operation was expanding. So I got more involved in all of the pre-production, pre-press activities. So there was typing, composing, paste up, layout. Then I got involved in photography of the layouts, which is like graphic arts photography. So it's not like regular. It's a very big stationary camera where you photograph the layouts of the pages. Pages are laid out two up, and then you photograph them. And then the negatives are then stripped together. It's called stripping or film assembly. So I got involved with that also. And then the proofing, blue line proofing. And then when everything was approved, then making plates and sending the plates downstairs. This was upstairs in the Tiffany place. And downstairs was where all of the machinery was, big printing press and binding, folding machine, so on.
Now, that's in New York, and how did you end up going to LA for this particular push for the Caitanya-caritāmṛta?
Okay, at a certain point, it was determined by Prabhupada and others that it would be better to print, it would be more inexpensive to print in Japan and not spend so much time with the machinery, so that devotees would have more time for hearing, chanting, preaching, sankirtan, and so on. And so they decided to amalgamate the printing operation in Los Angeles. So all of the printing side, all of the machinery side was given up, and it just became a publishing. So BBT in Los Angeles became just a publishing arm rather than printing and publishing. So we all moved from New York City, Brooklyn, where we were, and we moved to Los Angeles. And so very shortly after we moved, this is when the decision to print. Okay, I remember standing on the street. So you know how you always have some very significant recollection of some happening that stays with you. I remember standing on the street and hearing either from Brahmaswar Maharaj or Radhavallabha. It might have been, I don't remember that, but I remember hearing that this is what we were going to do. We were going to be printing, producing these books in such a short time. Now, you have to understand, I was a householder at that time, and I really was plugging in my print. I loved the printing work, the work, that the engagement was like just fit my psychophysical nature. But I was a 9-to-5er. I would just, or actually 10. I would mosey in at about 10 o'clock, do some, the printing work, which I love, the production work. And then 5 o'clock, go home, and my wife would prepare something nice. And so I was, it was like I said, it was like a 9-to-5. When I heard that I knew how much we were working and what it was producing. And when I heard that we had to do this production, my thought was, oh, I really don't want to do this. I didn't look forward to that.
It sounded like a lot.
Oh God, it was, I knew what it meant, and it was like, wow, too much.
So let's hold on that, because we're going to get into the technical development in a second. Since you're so involved in publishing not only of the CC but several other books, it'll be exciting to hear from you what it actually entails to print a book back in 1972. Mother Agatmika, how about yourself? How did you come to be in LA and get involved with the printing service? In what degree?
Let's see. I grew up in Detroit, And after high school, when I graduated from high school in '66, I went to the convent in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I was there for a couple years. And then I began to realize that this was too, what is it? Restricted in terms of the concept of God being a universal God. Why am I, practicing or training to be a person who's going to bring people to just one sectarian religion? So then I thought, yeah, if God is one and the message of God is absolute, I need to search. So then I decided to move to New York, Manhattan, where I thought there would be the greatest number of religions and philosophies in one locale. Because our family had previously visited New York, so that was some familiarity a little bit. So there I was in New York. I landed a job at the United Nations as a clerk typist at UNICEF. So then, of course, a couple years went by, and then I met the devotees in '71. Actually, I first met. I got a BTG from them, and it was the article. There was an article in that BTG about the 4 regulative principles, and that really attracted me and appealed to me. I thought, I really have to see these people in the flesh,
You're the first devotee I've heard who went to New York to find God, and now you're attracted by the 4 regs.
Oh, interesting. So then I went to the temple. Oh, well, it was Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, who I met on the subway, and I asked him where a Buddhist nunnery, if he knew where there would be a Buddhist nunnery. And he said, I don't know where there's a Buddhist nunnery, but I can tell you where Buddhism is at. And he said, well, because at that time I was waking up out of my my meditation, my Buddhist meditation, and I thought, before I leave this world and merge with the totality of spirit, I have to go back and tell my acquaintances some message before I leave them behind. So there I met Bhuta Bhavana on the subway platform in his saffron with a mridanga. And he told me, he says, the Buddhists, they want to go home alone, but the devotees of Krishna want to take others back with them. So that really struck a chord with me. I wanted to take my friends back, So then I went to the Sunday feast the next day, and I stayed overnight and was on Jones Beach distributing BTGs the next day in Asari.
Wow.
It was the 4th of July weekend. And that was in 1971. And my first service, they took me over to the ISKCON press and introduced me to Śrī composing machine. Actually, I think it was the IBM Selectric at that time, Madhusudana Prabhu. And then I was sent with Valai to the Redaktron composing offices in Manhattan to be trained up how to use the Redaktron composing machine.
Wow.
After some time, I don't know exactly when. Okay, so there I am in New York, typing or composing. And then I ended up in New Vrindavan. I got, quote unquote, kidnapped. It was a secret arrangement. It was just after the Bali Mardan and Taittiriya thing, where I was serving Taittiriya and doing press work. And I was just really overwhelmed. And when the Sankirtan party from New Vrindavan came through, and I knew Mahara and all, they said, hey, we can get you out of here. We can bring you over to, and you can do Sankirtan with us. So, because I was doing Sankirtan book distribution in New York. also. Anyway, so I did. I left New York in that way. But when the marathon was beginning in Los Angeles, I don't know who it was that called Kirtanananda, but he said they told him that they need me there because I was actually a very fast typist. So, yeah, so they flew me out to Los Angeles, and there I landed. And I'll stop
You got
there.
kidnapped again.
Yeah, transferred, whatever.
Very sweet. Very sweet. And it sounds like you and Madhusudan Prabhu have a lot of inside knowledge of those details of what the machinery and the different layers of how to actually put a book together. So we're eager to hear that in a moment. Let's hear from Pushkar Prabhu, though. Prabhu, how did you get into this CC push? And of course, you're a painter, and that's kind of a unique also effort. We'll get into the details of how you all approached creating those paintings. It was a very surrendered approach, especially for most artists.
I'm unmuted, okay? Yeah.
Yep.
So Ragatmika, I'm seeing her frozen. She doesn't move. Is that how you see her? But somehow the camera was frozen. It was moving. I don't know what happened.
Because I unmuted myself. Am I moving?
No, I'm just gonna don't Pushkar Prabhu. You go ahead, and I'll try and get with Mother Ragatmika. We can get her back into it.
Well, okay. So we have to go back then. I came. Actually, Madhusudan was there in '67. It just shows the contrast. I saw Prabhupada in '67, but I didn't join. And I continued my wayfaring ways till '70, and then I joined in Hawaii. But I used to live up the street in Frederick Street, a couple blocks from the Frederick Street Temple in '68. So I had I'd go there on Sunday. And although I saw Prabhupada in '67 at that Village East Theater, he came and did some, according to my parents, I saw him in Tompkins Square, but I was a little bit, a lot of LSD. So I don't exactly remember, but they said I was there. They saw him. And Madhu remembers my parents. Anyway, but when I was in Frederick Street, I used to go to Sunday Feast, and the women like Jamuna and Malati, Chandravali, they had an ashram practically across the street from my studio. And I'd see them all the time, every day. They'd come back and forth. On a Sunday, I'd go down there and usually get the Sunday feast. And first time I took the feast, I was raving, to all my macrobiotic friends and saying, hey, this food, this Krishna food is amazing. It was anyway. So then I moved up California in a different weird ashram / not ashram, more like just whatever they were. People crazy. So at some point decided to go to Hawaii because we'd gone to this Altamont concert, which is a huge, insane, horrible thing. So I flew to Hawaii like 3 days later or 2 days later to get away for the flower thing is over. When I went to Hawaii, I went to the Big Island. If anyone knows about Hawaii, when you're in Hawaii, you have to say the Big Island because that's Hawaii Island.
Right.
So I went to Hawaii Island, and when I was on Hawaii Island, I didn't have much contact with any kind of devotees. So one day there was a guy I was living in an abandoned house, and the guy he actually had a house. I used to go there and bathe, and he had just come back from Honolulu. For some reason, as I left his house, taking a Japanese bath, and anyway, in a wooden bathtub, and he said Hare Krishna like that. So that was about the most Hare Krishna I heard for those months. It was from end of December till April. The end of March, I flew. I was doing headstands and practicing. Unwittingly, I was doing Kundalini yoga. I was just reading all kinds of books. So one hippie saw me standing on my head, and he said, hey, I'm flying over to Maui tomorrow. There's just a thing there, whaling spree. I guess the Hawaiians used to kill a bunch of whales. That wasn't my type thing, but I said, all right, how much is it? $25. Okay, that's exactly what I have. Obviously, I'm going. So when I didn't know nobody, nothing. I knew all the beaches, everywhere to stay, all the freebies, everything on the Big Island. And we got to Maui. Some Portuguese guys wanted to beat me up. something. I couldn't sleep one night, and I was sitting under this banyan tree, just kind of playing my harmonica. I hadn't slept in a day or some night, and suddenly a guy taps me, and I open my eyes, and I'm really kind of freaked out, weird. He said, "Hey, you want to jam with us?" We're over on the other side. There's a huge banyan tree. It's in Lahaina, you know. So I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And they're chanting, you know. So they're sitting. I didn't think in those days, ISKCON, not ISKCON. It was actually the Sai people, and they were chanting, and they had some prasad they were giving out, and I sat there for like 30, 40 minutes, and then there was time to go back to the ashram. They said, "You want to go back to the ashram?" I said, "Why not? I'm following my vibes, man." I was like the ultimate hippie, you know. Okay, yeah, okay, going. So I stayed there, never left. But it wasn't really ISKCON. It was an adjunct or a splinter of ISKCON. And, you know, I was preaching, and it's kind of interesting. But there was this woman in the car, and she had just been on Oahu and had an interview between Sai and an old friend of mine who was the head. Who was a radical left-wing guy. And from the SDS, George Sarant, they had taken over one of the buildings at Hawaii University. And Sai was preaching to my old friend in this little tape recorder, you know, and I'm listening. I said, "That's interesting. It's George Sarant, my old buddy." Because he was the head rabble-rouser. And he was explaining very nicely the superiority of Bhakti Yoga over everything else. And very succinctly, he was good at that. He was really good at it. So I was listening. It takes about 45 minutes to get back to the ashram, and I just stayed there. And then gradually I moved over to the other island, and we did Harinam from Maui too. But we did everything that ISKCON did. In fact, near the end of joining ISKCON, we actually were changed 24 rounds a day. And we had this guy, Tushta Krishna. He was like an army general, sergeant type of guy. Madhu may remember him, and I don't know, but he had us like, you know, every 10 minutes we had to have a ladle of ice water over our neck during japa, and yeah, and definitely it doesn't matter if you were sleeping or not. So, and we used to do a lot of Harinam, but because I was an artist, I did less Harinam, but still I probably did 4 hours a day in the evenings. And but you remember Bo Schneff, Madhu? And Bo Schneff was there. He actually joined the same day as me in Maui. Bo did. He was the old poster in San Francisco.
He was a designer.
On Facebook. Yeah, he designed the BTG for a while, remember?
Right.
Then he went back he didn't join back to Siddha, though. But I've been in touch with him a little on Facebook and on whatever.
So how was it, Prabhu, that you ended up in LA for this particular...
Okay, so one day Sai, after many weeks of pondering, decided, because Govinda Dasi came and busted up this whole meeting. That's all. I mentioned it in my book. It's 2 or 3 pages. Govinda Dasi came with someone else, and she busted up the meeting that the Sai people were having at this church at the crossroads. It's a Universalist church. You know, it's very church. There's no altar or anything. It's just a meeting room, and we used to have our gatherings there. And so Sai had this psychic sleep thing where people would lie down, and you know, they'd walk you out of your body, kind of thing. Prabhupada didn't approve of it later, but so in the midst of this, I'm lying down. I hear a ruckus, and I got up. What's going on? It's usually silence, you know. And there's Govinda Dasi and Tushta Krishna, the sergeant at arms. He was trying to force her out of the room, which is a big room, and you know, I mean, and Sai, in the midst of it, is saying, "Leave her alone, let her speak." So then she starts reading a letter from Prabhupada about. She primed Prabhupada to say, you know, Sai's doing this and this and this and this and this, and you know, we got to stop him basically. And do something. So he wrote a letter saying, "This poor Sai is not my disciple. My disciples dress, you know, with shaved heads. They wear dhotis. They wear saris," just to make it real specific. So shortly, you know, after that, about a week later, then that was it, and he had everybody join ISKCON. So okay, then I went to LA and I saw the paintings. They had some of the paintings were sent from Boston to LA and probably other places, and some were done in LA, I think. I can't say exactly. There's a lot of forensic stuff I know, and some I don't know. But before I forget, I will say that it wasn't 17 books, but only about 15 were CCs. The 5th killed because 2 had already been produced. Anyway, they remember. You already had a Madhya 1 and an Adi 2, I believe.
Two Adis.
Two Adis? Okay.
I think so.
Then, yeah, well, something. There were, so fifth canto adds up. When you have the two fifth cantos, that adds up to 17. So, Radha Bal was credited. He doesn't want to be involved in anything, but he was on the walk, and he was also one of the guys that probably, besides Rameshwar, you know, they were, two of them were meeting and said, Prabhupada, we could do a book in 2 months. No, he said, all of them in 2 months. So that's impossible. You know, Prabhupada leveled it at them both, really, basically. I mean, and Rameshwar, I don't think he was a sannyasi then. He was a brahmachari, just to be a little forensic. So I was painting in LA. I was painting disciplic succession pictures. And then one day, Devahuti, she was a senior person in the art department. And I seen her paintings. She has paintings in Prabhupada's LA quarters. And I really liked her paintings. Anyway, she walked in. She's Devahuti. And at that time, you know, I'm 23. She's 43 or something. But she had white hair. She looked older. And she was, and I was getting ready. I already knew I was going to fly to Boston and join the other artists. Karandar had said, you should go and join the other artists. I don't want to get too long-winded, but you know, there's a lot of funny stuff. So she was complaining that she didn't like to work with the artists because later on, when all the letters came out, we realized that Prabhupada had written at least 3-4 times telling Jadharani that she should be accorded special respect, space, because she's senior. She's like 20 years older than everybody else, you know. But I mean, I've spoken to Bhardraj and Jadharani. They don't feel like they offended her in any way, but she just couldn't work. So for quite a while, she didn't do any paintings. I don't know. Later on in the CC rush, she came back and did some paintings. Anyway, in the interim of Karandar telling me to go join the artists, they moved to New York. I thought I was going to Boston. Next thing I hear, oh, they're in Karandar said, well, I just moved to New York. And so I came there late one night, and the next morning, I was taken over to Tiffany Place, and which was really, I mean, just between us four, but Karandar was there. I mean, LA was like, Karandar was really a good leader, and everything was, you know, nice. But New York was nice. It was great. It was different. You know, it was like, wow. I just, as I'm walking into the lower floor, there's a big wide doorway with me, you know, kind of industrial place. And I hadn't even been upstairs. And I hear this yelling, screaming, literal cursing. And it was not between Narayan, Chandan, and Advaita. These guys were pretty heavy duty, you know, all of them. And they were, I don't know who, I mean, when Narayan's around, usually things get to that point. Anyway, so they were yelling. I was like, oh, this is different than LA. This is not LA. So, I mean, I painted there. And when I first came in, I couldn't really carry out a painting because I was really used to doing a more expressionistic, abstract, psychedelic style, you know. Although when I was, the only person that used to preach to me, really, when I was at Frederick Street, going there on Sundays, was Upendra. And Upendra was 3-4 times he mentioned, oh, you should paint Krishna, you know. He knew I was an artist. He didn't have no idea what I did. I didn't have any idea what I did either, I don't think, but I did something. And I said, oh, I don't think I can paint like that, you know. But
you wound up doing wonderfully. So many
one thing that struck me was one time he said to me, oh, no, you know, look, there's Jayananda. And like, nobody was in the San Francisco temple room except Jayananda. And he was sitting, if you looked in on our left, and you can see his profile, his right side, and he's chanting japa. And Upendra said, just like Jayananda, you know, he drives a cab for Swamiji. He gives all his money to Swamiji. He drives a cab. And like, my idea of a cab driver had nothing to do with Jayananda. It was like completely other dimensional person, you know. And he's sitting there with his brow knit, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. I mean, I'm looking at him saying, I said he's a cab driver. Cab driver, that guy? He's like, he looked like someone from another, you know, dimension. He was just so absorbed in his job, and I thought, oh, this guy could drive a cab. It didn't convert me immediately. It took another couple of years for me.
So you did your paintings there.
As far as coming to the marathon, I went to India, and Prabhupada wanted artists to go to India. That's a whole hour's talk with Bali Mardan, and he didn't want anyone to go, and he was overriding Prabhupada. And the whole trip. Bhardraj went. I ended up going. I stayed from. So I was there in the beginning of '74, and in '75 I went up to see Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and I was already assigned in Mayapur to do so many big things. And everybody had to do a lot of artwork on the doors, on the walls, everywhere. So when I got up there, this is an interesting take on Prabhupada's pragmatism, right? Jayapataka happened to be there, and then Prabhupada said, "Oh, you should go to LA," right? And there was no marathon, there was nothing, but he wanted me to go back and work on the books. And Jayapataka even sort of complained, "Well, you told that boy he should stay in Mayapur and paint, because Jayapataka wanted to have stuff in his. Everybody wants their project going on." And Prabhupada said, "No, it's better to paint for the book, then it can hang on the wall. So you do both. You can do both at one time." Of course, it wasn't in Mayapur or anything. It wasn't going to be a mural, but it was. So I walked in the first day to see Jadharani, and all the artists hadn't moved yet, and the whole press hadn't moved. But I remember she was anticipating Dhriti coming, and we had anyway. I don't think we didn't have all the artists, but I forget. My mother remembers whether Muralidhar and Parikit were there yet. I don't know, but I was there, and
Yeah, I believe so. No, Parikit came in Boston. I remember the meeting.
No, whether he went to LA with the whole press or the artists, I think generally they moved before the rest of the press. That's my take.
Oh.
But Jadharani, you have to read her book over again to see. She has stuff in her book. So in any case, she gave me some painting to do. She was going to do this one particular painting, was Lord Chaitanya circumambulate. I think that was the first painting I did in CC. I hadn't painted for the books, remember, in 2 years. And even when I did, I couldn't hardly finish a painting. I started finishing them before I left. And the first thing I did for the book was this little Prabhupada head, which I just happened to do this little head of Prabhupada. And Jayadurya, I was up on the radiator in the art room, and Jayadurya came in. He wasn't a Swami or anything. And he said, "That's super excellent." And then he put it on the back cover of the Gita. So otherwise, whatever I did with Jadharani, she had mostly had to finish my paintings. It was like the Super Soul painting, and then I tried to do it, couldn't finish it. I designed one painting, 2 or 3 paintings. Parikit Maharaj being cursed, and then there was with Samika Rishi, and there's like a split level painting, and then with Arjun sitting on a bed with Krishna, there's a beautiful setting in it, and I designed it, but I couldn't finish it. Jadharani finished it. She put real long hair on Krishna. Probably later on, probably didn't express he didn't like all the big hair. I mean, the thing is with the artists, all our experiences were not recorded, basically. When he had dispatched us to go to India, it wasn't recorded. And then when me and Bhargava spoke to Prabhupada for about 45 minutes one time on art in Mayapur in '75, not recorded. That's all in our heads. That's, so every once in a while we talk about it, but it could be a sidetrack, all that. But so basically,
well, let me come back to I'll come back to you when we get to the art department. I want to hear first how the words actually get to the page, and then we'll hear something about how the pictures come after that. So let me come back to Mother Ragatmika and Madhusudan Prabhu specifically. The idea of how words get on a page these days is quite easy and simple compared to having to go and get training how to run big machines to do the different functions that it takes to print a book back in the 70s. So maybe you guys can walk us through technically what had to be done, what it meant to produce these 15, 17 books in 2 months.
Which one of them is going to talk?
Let's start with Mother Ragatmika.
Okay. Well, we would. I would be typing from a manuscript, which was produced by either Jayadvaita, Mamata, or Dukkha Huntry, who would transcribe Prabhupada's words, put it on, type it out, and that's what we typed from to enter into the composing machine. And what that would produce, tell me if I'm right, Madhusudana Prabhu. because I used to take excerpts. I was typing all night, and then I'd go to Mangalartik, and I used to tear off an excerpt sometimes of such nectar, this Caitanya-caritāmṛta, and I would take it to share it with somebody at Mangalartik. But what the machine produced of the typing was this box, a black box that would come out of the redaction somehow, and then it was taken into the other room where Archita Prabhu would put it in, and then that would produce the final pages, correct? Do you recall? Is that right, Madhusudana?
You know, that's further on from where I was involved with the composing. Initially, it started with the IBM Select Your Composer.
Yes.
So what you're talking about is a further advancement in the technology of pre-press work.
That's
The
Go ahead.
composing machine was an advancement from just typing, because the composing machine produced very clear type that you would see in a book, as opposed to a typewriter, which is not very sharp.
Mhm.
So the composing machine would produce the work that would be then cut apart, pasted up into pages with page numbers. What you're talking about is when the whole computer, things got much more computerized. Things started out with the composing machine and just pasting it up, and then those paste ups or layouts, let's say, would be photographed on the big, large graphic arts camera. And then those negatives would be used to strip together to make the plates. Then the further advancement is from that process, becoming more mobilized, or what do you say? Speed. The process would be speeded up by the computer. So you would type it, and that would, I guess that was speeding up the process, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that is eventually how everything was done. Was on the computer, the redaction, which I was never involved in.
So what particularly did you do in regards to the printing of the CC?
In the CC, I took the layouts that were finished. So whatever came out from Archita, from this computer, the computer, this is photo typesetting. That's what that was. So you, Pragatmika, would input the information from the manuscript, and then that data was put into given to Archita, and he outputted all of this paper printing, sort of photographic paper, but it was just the type, and that would get, again, cut apart. Very similar. That would get cut apart, put onto a page, and with page numbers and head and everything probably was on that. The page number, title, the what do you call it? Running heads. The top of the page, which would say what chapter it was, or what book it was, or what chapter it was. So
there was still spotting going on at a certain point, right? You had to touch up
the spotting. Yes, the spotting came after. So that was laid out the same way as before. It was laid out and then photographed, and you get these negatives, and the negatives have to be cleaned up because there's always these little holes in the negative that would produce black little spots if there's anything other than the type. So you'd have to paint out, or they call opaquing. We were using paint that was opaque, that would be opaque. And so I was training up people to do the opaquing. We have, because that was very easy to do. You just said, you have to do it carefully. But I would tell people that all of the rest of the type, that's all Krishna. And the little dots, that's Maya. So we have to get rid of all of the Maya. That only is left is Krishna. That was my training.
That's
methodology. So
there was
so
a lot
then
of
the
spraying
negative-
going on. That's a
the
spray
spraying
stuff. Yamaha got his cancer because of the spraying, and like in Tiffany Place, they were spraying. There was no ventilation, and
the spraying must have been glue for the page. But I thought, okay, I didn't really. Yeah. At one point, we were using waxing machine. You run it through a waxer. So I don't know about this, but I know.
So once the finished page is there, then you're creating a whole one copy of the book to then be sent off to a printer to actually produce.
Well, for CC, we would, but because we weren't doing any of the printing at that point, we weren't doing the printing ourselves.
Right.
So we would just take the negative, we would clean up the negatives and send the negatives to Japan. And they would do all the work that we used to do in Tiffany Place, which was putting the film together.
That's a photograph that you've taken of this page that's been created in this method that you just described for us.
Yes, they would send the negatives to Japan, and they would do the work that we used to do, which was film assembly or stripping. They would place it on, all of these pages together, depending on how big of a sheet they were using. And they would place that together. Then
whenever a volume was actually published, that would appear on the altar at Mangalarti. So that was frequently
and they had
happening.
gold edges. They were beautiful with gold edges.
Yeah.
The first copies.
the first copies, yes.
With gold, and then Prabhupada would get one, and one would be sent to L.A. There was one night that was, I'll never forget, Radha Ballabha and Ramaswar going to the airport to pick up 4 different books, CCs, and I can't remember. I think they were mostly Madhya Anchit. I asked them, they don't remember. Anyway, but 4 at one time. And they were coming from the United States. They switched over and printed. They were switching. I remember they came from somewhere in like Tennessee or Texas. It was a printer.
Kentucky, I believe.
And so we got there at about 11:30, and the plane hadn't arrived or hadn't unloaded. So I was in the car. They went to the port and out in the airport to the commercial thing, and then they came back and said it won't be ready for an hour. We're gonna nap. You stay awake. He told me I had to stay awake and wake them up in an hour by looking at the clock on the car or something, in the car. So I stayed awake and I tried to chant or something, and then I woke them up and they ran in, Rameshwaran, Radha Ballabha, and they came back with a box and had 2 of each, 4 different volumes. That was the maximum. We never saw anything like that. It was like, wow, 4 new books. One new book was amazing. Like 4 new books with gold edges. Oh my God. Too much.
I think something that was interesting is the work that was done. It was like every 3 days a book was produced, or our work was finished. So like the 3rd day that we had to do an all-nighter. Do you remember doing any all-nighters for Gatmika Prabhu?
Me, I was always an all-nighter and an all-dayer. In fact,
that's what it seemed like.
Radha Ballabha Prabhu told me that on one morning walk at that time, he told Prabhupada that there's one Mataji who's typing day and night. She hardly stops. And Prabhupada said, yes, she is running on spiritual energy. Of course, we were all running on spiritual energy to bring about the impossible to become possible. But if it wasn't for Rameswar's organization of that whole community. I had somebody who was bringing my prasadam to me, who was doing my laundry and taking care of any of my needs. And I was so enlivened by typing these wonderful pastimes. It was ecstatic. And then I remember I would chant my japa alone in the temple in the afternoon. That was my time to just concentrate on my japa right then. And I went to Mangal Arati. I don't even know where I slept. I don't remember sleeping, but I must have. But honestly, I can't even picture where was I staying or sleeping. I was only in that office, it seemed. And everything came to me what I needed to maintain me. So that was, and actually when Prabhupada toured the new BBT facilities there, he stood next to me while I was typing and he said, I dreamt of this in Vrindavan. So this, meaning,
wow.
He dreamt of his books being published with the latest technology at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember it being so intense. It's basically you work till you drop. The expression "shop till you drop." But
yeah.
What we did, it was like work till you drop. I particularly remember trying to work through the night because I think it was like the last day that had to get finished, and working through the night, and then they bring prasadam, Mahaprasadam, and it was great because you got all this phenomenal prasadam, but it really wasn't the answer because you know what happened. It's delicious and you get enlivened, but you know what happens after you eat.
Yeah, you
have to take LSD left side down. You got to relax and take a nap. But when you're already sleep deprived, a nap turns into just sleeping. So you had to. It was a struggle between staying awake by eating and just continuing on. I remember particularly going to Mangalartik after the that whole night shift, and somebody else. I remember seeing somebody standing there, and we were just kind of standing like, just trying to stand up straight. And I remember someone in front of me who was also up all night, just like falling over, sleeping, falling asleep while standing, just catching themselves and fall.
At one point.
Go ahead, Mother.
It occurred to me that this was a truly historical event, that the Caitanya-caritāmṛta was now for the first time being rendered into the English language. And we had our hands in it, by Prabhupada's mercy. So that was very enlivening to me when that occurred to me during this time. Oh my, this is historical.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if there was that sense amongst each of you or the devotees in general, what the pace was that needed to be kept and what was kind of like the celebration at the end. Was there a sense of accomplishment communally that this had been done and we can offer this now to Prabhupada?
I don't remember.
I don't particularly remember.
It was gradually, the books were coming out, and every time it was an accomplishment. Each book.
That was a celebration.
So it would have been anticlimactic to have one big climax because everything, like the 4 books at 1:30 in the morning, with Rameshwar and Radha getting that box. I mean, for me, that was a crescendo right there. But
yes, every book was a success. It was an accomplishment.
That was the reward.
I think that the press people had it harder than the artists. We definitely worked a lot, like 12, 14 hours. But I remember going to Mongol and Agni Dev or somebody be leading the evening and run down, still go, run back up. One time, Tamal Krishna was holding a laundry bag in front of the green building, and I was just running to see Rameshwar about a painting. And he was holding the laundry bag. He says, Pushkar, I need this laundry done. And I didn't know him very well. I said, well, there's the laundromat, Maharaj, You think I'm going to stop and do your laundry anywhere? I didn't even think. I just said, the laundromat's an alleyway.
What was the what was the process like for the artist, Prabhu? Maybe you can give us a little more detail on that, because from what I've heard, it was a kind of assembly line where one devotee was specialized in painting backgrounds or jewelry or hair, etc. And so everybody had their kind of...
Well, no, that assembly line stopped in Boston and was in New York, but by the time we were working in LA, yeah, we started a sort of assembly line, but it wasn't the same type of thing. You know, if you couldn't finish a painting, for one thing, there was a guy named Hector. He was this Argentinian older fellow. He was super expert at painting landscape and backdrop, and he suddenly has showed up. I could point out so many backdrops he did. If you hold up book covers from CC, and later on he came back for the 10th Canto. He also did paintings at Fate. I mean, he was fast. He had one bad leg, but he was like an Argentinian archer. He was a national champ. You know, he died.
Wow.
He never got initiated by Prabhupada. Later on, he got Rameshwar, and then he got Narayan Mark. But he was a super expert. So, like, on the top of my head, I could just estimate he did about half the backdrops. I mean, Muralidhar, Radharani, they would do the figures in some of the paintings. I mean, he was just fast and good. You know, he would do, like, you have a painting with Lord Chaitanya in his dream, and he's thinking he's in a cave. Radha Krishna go into a cave, and you see Lord Chaitanya's outside picking flowers, and he's in Goloka, and like he knocked off this beautiful willow tree background in a cave, and you know, then that's one off the top of my head. Like when you find there's a beach scene with Lord Chaitanya running the speed of mind, he just knocked off the beach, and Jadharani did Lord Chaitanya, and there's an Apsara, it was Chota Haridas. There's two right there, but if I struggle with my old brain here, if you show me the books, I can see he did so many backdrops. There was a painting I was having a big problem with. I guess I wasn't that fired up about it. I designed it, but then I didn't like it, and it was no time to think. It was supposed to be Ram Vijay Day, and Lord Chaitanya, and they're like acting like Hanuman and the monkeys, and they're going to destroy Ravana, and so I didn't like my own design, and then Hector came in and he did the whole background, and so that up for me.
You had something you were raising your hand for?
Yes, I know that Bhargava Prabhu was sent to India to photograph
all the photographs
because
motorcycle.
They knew they couldn't paint fast enough to paint every pastime. So they filled in some of those picture plates, you know, with these scenes of the holy places.
The actual places.
Yeah,
I know Gauri
one picture he got into Gundicha, which is, you know, a white guys can't go into. He jumped the wall, and if you see that photo, it's in that book. There's a guy, like one of the pandas, is walking toward him like this, you know, trying to. What are you doing? He's about to. I don't know what happened. He jumped back over the wall. He got the picture.
Wow.
Gauri told me that when she was doing some paintings at that time, she said that painters sometimes would fall asleep at their painting, and then they would wake up, and so much more of it was completed because some other painter stepped in and, you know, added
it wasn't
to it.
Totally. Yeah, it was like that. It was like that. Yeah.
That's what she told me.
This is beautiful painting Muralidhar did with Lord Chaitanya's like leaning back in a tree in Vrindavan, and his cows and peacocks. Beautiful cover of Madhya 7 or 8, and the whole backdrop with cows and everything was done by Hector. Muralidhar just painted Lord Chaitanya, for instance. And then there were 3 paintings that Bhargav designed for Jadharani that were in Madhya Lila. One of them is it's a boat scene. And it's a nice, beautiful golden boat, and they're in the water. And then Bhargav had designed, because he's expert at designing, you know. And he actually did only 2 paintings fully himself. I remember Jadharani being on his case. Bhargav, when are you going to do your painting? You know, and he was just always, you know, Bhargav's real relaxed, wants to lead bhajan, wants to talk. Plus, he was running Fate, you know. But I remember I said to him, I was echoing Jadharani. I was looking down from the art studio, and he's in the building downstairs, in the alley, and I said, Bhargav, when you do that painting? He's, you can see, you know. So I went over to his place, and he did that painting of fabulous painting of the Buddhists. they gave Lord Chaitanya some kind of weird food. Who knows what was in it? They're trying to trick Lord Chaitanya. I don't know what this guy was thinking. And the bird is picking up the giant tali. It was a huge bird. It looks, it's like Garuda. And the guy is like falling, right? He did it in 4 days or something. It was amazing.
Wow.
And then he said, Pushkar, you recognize this guy? And I looked. I said, not exactly. It's an old man on the right, I think. He said, it's Krishnadas Babaji, Prabhupada's godbrother. He had done it from memory. He just decided for fun to put him in pain.
That's so sweet.
Raj.
What's the were the paintings kind of displayed in the same way as the books? Were the other devotees able to see the paintings before they made it into the books, or you didn't see the paintings until they were published?
Yeah, no, they didn't. I mean, if they worked at the press, they might have seen them. And once in a while, they'd bring somebody up, like a book distributor, like Gopavinda Paul, to get feedback. That happened later, but I'm not sure if it happened then. We're in too much of a mood,
Yeah.
We're moving along. So we didn't take the paintings out and have an exhibit. They were just put in racks in one room.
Huh.
And Rameshwar used to keep them. I thought that was the safest room in ISKCON. It was like humidity controlled. And then when Rameshwar left, boom, I came back to LA from Hawaii, and boom, the room was gone. And I'm like, what happened to the paintings? And Sora and Savas had paintings up distributed here and there in everyone's office. They rented some out. I was like, whoa.
That sounds like a different story for a different time. So it's a good time to maybe close out here, devotees. And it's been really exciting hearing these details, the specifics, the labor of love of this printing marathon. So is there anything, kind of final thoughts, experiences that you'd like to share around that? Mother Ragatmika, you beautifully expressed, it kind of came to you what it meant to be putting the Caitanya-caritāmṛta into the Western world for the first time. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us as a close?
Well, also, it was truly a team effort. I mean, you're only seeing 3 of us here, and there were so many. And the support that came from the community that was organized, like I said, I didn't have to think about anything but was in front of my face at that, computer like that. So it was a team effort for sure.
Any shout outs, any names you want to give some appreciation to? Well,
I know I can't remember all the composers' names, but Bolai was there for sure, and with me. And like I said before, Mamata and Dukkha Hantri in the transcription department. And thank you.
Savia ever worked at, you remember Savia, Rukmini's mother? Didn't she work at the press at one time? Remember her? She's
I can't remember in what capacity.
Savia.
Yeah, I can't remember.
The young girl, Rukmini, you're talking about.
No, I know
her mom. Yeah.
Her mother.
Her mother.
I don't know what she was doing.
I remember her working at the press, but I don't remember what she did exactly. But usually the women did what Ragatmika did.
Well, there was one devotee called in to help at one point with the layout. I remember Urakram Das, who now is Padmanabha Swami. So he came in for a while, and I tried to contact him, but the timing didn't work out because I found out I wasn't contacted early enough. But maybe he could, maybe something for another time. But he was called in to help, and.
Wasn't Gadagraj also called, or didn't he?
Yeah, I mentioned the Gadagraja, and he was willing to talk if we need more people to talk. I mean, artists alone, we had at least 8, 9, 10. So, and a lot of them are gone. I mean, either gone or gone. One way they're gone. I mean, Parikit.
Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Who?
I have a thought that we kept that mood of marathon went all the way through 5th canto, 6th, 7th, all the way. It kept going, in the art department. Like, yeah, we got to get it. It was like we kept that mood.
And that was in LA, Pushkar Prabhu?
In LA. Yeah, at the beginning of '77, me and Ramdas went to India. We were actually trying to get there for that Kumbh Mela where Prabhupada was at the beginning in January, but
and all about
we had to keep working on knife candle paintings. We couldn't make it.
I thought also maybe Navadvip was involved because he was doing paste up work in New York, but when he came to LA, he was like head pujari. So I don't know if he. I spoke to him. I asked him about it. He said he couldn't remember. He wasn't sure. He said he might have done some work for the books.
Good to know. Yeah, so many names to appreciate, but we're very grateful to have each of you on today to hear a little something of the effort, the labor of love that went into this treasure for the world, this beautiful Caitanya-caritāmṛta. So on behalf of GBC SPT, I thank you all for being with us today. And thank you everybody at home who's watching. We'll look forward to having you each back soon. You probably each deserve your own show to be able to share your experiences. But
this is not live. This is something you show later, or
oh, this is live right now, Prabhu. We've been live the whole time. So we'll
watch my language.
You're safe
Next time.
Well, so
I'll
maybe
wear a mask.
we can bring you all back for your own segment to share your future service. And thank you again for your contribution specifically to this printing of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Thank you again, dear devotees. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
And thank you again, devotees, for being able to tune in today. We are having many more speakers leading up to Gaur Purnim, wonderful events. So please keep an eye on the GBC SPT page, and we'll look forward to having you back again soon. Hare Krishna.